What happens when an airplane is hit by lightning? As we know, lightning or thunderstorms in general is one of those hazards that we try to mitigate or avoid when flying. This is a new video series that I'm thinking of adding to the channel so that we can use some of the information from these hypotheticals or scenarios and apply it to situations that we have been presented in some of the tests that we could come across. For example, the situational judgment test that some of us or some of you guys had to take. The goal here is to be able to use these hypotheticals or these scenarios and apply the situational judgment test concept and also the STAR concept. So let's get into it. Of course, if you find value in this one, don't forget to drop a like. If you think this is something that you want to see in the future with more hypotheticals or more scenarios, please don't forget to drop a like as well. And of course, leave your thoughts in the comment section below, because there's going to be a short question towards the end of this video where I would ask you to do something. And I hope that you guys can participate and share your answers with the community. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks for joining again. So let's imagine you're a first officer. You'll be working with a captain with a lot of experience, and you have your cabin crew, your flight attendants along with you on this flight. You guys showed up, you did your crew briefing, you talked about every possible situations that could come up on this flight. You looked at the weather and everything seemed to be just fine along the route of the flight. Maybe a few thunderstorms here and there, but nothing along the route of the flight. So you went down the jet bridge, got on the airplane. The captain did his own pre-flight. You went around to do your walk around, making sure the airplane is airworthy, while the flight attendants or the cabin crew members are doing their own pre-flight checks. When all of this was done, you guys started boarding, while you guys were, the pilots were working on just programming the route. As you were programming this route, ATC informed you of a possible change in your routing, which means they would have to change what you were originally planned, which means all the route that you checked earlier, the routing that you checked earlier, is probably going to change slightly. But after, of course, looking at this new route that ATC has given you, still looked fine. Nothing stands out to you guys. And of course, you put in the flight plan, you got the dispatcher involved in all of this. So you got a little bit more feel. And by the time you're all done, you did your briefing. And here we go, the airplane gets pushed back. Taxied to the runway. Everything was working well while the flight attendants were in the back, making sure that the passengers were stored and seated properly. And they called you up to let you know they're seated and stored. And off you go to take off from the runway. You're climbing through 10,000 feet, speeding up, and right in front of you, maybe about 20-30 miles ahead of you, you notice a build-up of thunderstorms. And of course, that's not something you want to fly through. So you are the pilot flying while your captain is the pilot monitoring or pilot not flying. The question you ask your captain is, well, we're thinking maybe we go to the left side or to the right side. You share this information with your captain, and your captain thinks, okay, sure, he agrees with, either you go left or right. It doesn't matter at this point. But of course, you want to go to the upwind of this storm. So you maneuvered, and you maneuvered your FCP, or at least change the heading on the mode control panel. You got its approval, of course, and you started turning. Now, why are we doing this, or why are you doing this? Why are you trying to avoid the thunderstorms? Of course, there are some factors that you have to avoid or worry about when it comes to thunderstorms. One is, of course, the turbulence that you may experience if you go through this, which could be damaging to the airplane and could also cause some problems for the passengers, like it could cause injuries. But the other thing you also want to avoid is hails when it comes to thunderstorms. You also want to avoid lightning. And this brings us to the lightning subject. Why is lightning something we want to also prevent? As we know, according to the data, airplanes may likely get struck by lightning maybe once or twice a year, assuming they fly regularly. And generally speaking, the last time a lightning brought down an airplane was in 1967 on Pan Am 214. This was an airplane that was flying and got struck by lightning. It was a Boeing 707, got struck by lightning, and caused an ignition in the fuel tanks, of course, which led to an explosion, and that was catastrophic. Now, we've learned from this because airplanes are now built to be well grounded and bonded. And the way it works now is these airplanes do have very thick cells, fuel cells, to prevent an ignition from occurring. And of course, they also have what they call static wicks or static discharges. And the whole concept about this is if there's lightning that hits the airplane should be able to act like a Faraday cage, which would then help to dissipate the lightning. So pretty much it goes through the airplane and goes out somewhere. Usually the airplane would get hit either the nose, the wings, or the tail, and with the help of the static discharges, the electricity gets passed through the airplane and out without causing any damages. If any, it's usually minor. Now back to the scenario. You turned off the engine to avoid these thunderstorms and you were off course for some time. The question now is, what did you just do and why have you made that move? Now, applying the situational judgment test concept, one of the things that you did right was, of course, to talk to your captain about what you were thinking. So there was a shared mental model before you decided to act. The second thing is you need to understand that as a first officer, you want the pilot in command to be in agreement as well. So you shared what your thought process was. So in this case, you thought, okay, I could go to the right to stay on the upwind to avoid the storm. And then you brought that to the captain to let the captain know what you were thinking. And of course, he was in agreement with you. On the other hand, if you said you were going to go to the left side and the captain noticed, well, the winds, the way the storms are moving is actually going to move ahead of you, then the captain will be able to correct you. Now, as a first officer, you have to have a way of soliciting input from your captain. Of course, you need to be able to make decisions by yourself, but because the captain has the final authority when it comes to the operation of the airplane, you have to be able to solicit input from him by bringing your own thoughts, but also you want him to be in agreement with that if he's in agreement. And of course, if he has a different opinion because he understands the situation better than you do, then of course you have to take his input. On the other hand, if this was a captain role, how would you handle it? Would you just go ahead and do what you think is best, or would you ask your first officer for his input? This is very important because there's always a very big power dynamic due to the experience, which is called the power distance between the two people in the cockpit. For example, a very senior captain flying with a very junior first officer. This could also lead to an imbalance in the power dynamics, or in this case, power distance between the two crew members. And that can lead the first officer from being open to share what they understand even more at times. So what a good captain would do is, of course, to solicit input from the first officer by asking, what do you think we should do? The reason why it's important to solicit that input is because if the captain decides to say what he thinks is best, he would influence the way the first officer thinks, which could then prevent the first officer from actually speaking up, even though he had a different opinion. On the other hand, as a first officer, it's okay to share your own opinion because you want the captain to help you validate it based on maybe experience if needed. And of course, if it's something that you understand better or you are sure, then you maybe want to prove it to him by maybe pulling up in the books. And of course, you have to do it with the right manners. The whole idea about the situational judgment test and this whole concept is to understand the roles that you are at the moment and the situation you found yourself. I hope that this is something that you've benefited from. And the last task that I have for you is to use the star to describe this situation. If you use the situation, task, action, result, and reaction concept or the acronym, can you talk about the situation? Can you talk about the task that was done? Can you talk about the actions that was taken? And what were the results? Of course, I'll give you a pass on this result because I'm going to tell you what would happen. In this case, you're able to maneuver to avoid the thunderstorms. You pass the thunderstorms and everybody was just fine. Now, all of this was done in agreement with the flight attendants as well, keeping everybody informed of the situation about the thunderstorms. And of course, as you got back on course, you went back to also inform your dispatchers that weren't aware of this new development in the weather. And that is the reaction from it also, because now you've been able to take what you've learned that you guys didn't know, and you've been able to share it with all these other resources around to let them keep the other groups or the other flights that may be coming through that route informed, including the ATC as well. So I hope you guys have found some concepts from this and you're able to use it in a different scenario in the future.